Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Matt, and this is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit, your beacon of freedom and the American way of life. Tune in every Friday for a new episode as we dive into the world of liberty and what makes our country great. All right, guys, welcome back. Yes, we are back with another LLP episode. Oh, yeah.
Finally, man.
Dude, it's been way too long since we've cut episodes.
It has. And, for guys that don't do it every single day, like you get caught up in the minutia of life.
Dude,
it happens.
It has been like that. It do be like that sometimes.
Yep.
But we're back, and welcome back to Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit. This is Matt and Eric here. And, we talk about all kinds of different topics here on the podcast, and I love the direction that we're going with it. And, we're trying our best to increase production quality, and we're going to start bringing in some awesome new guests. And, since the last time that Matt was here, I just want to kind of do a little bit of housekeeping up front and just mention we upgraded our chairs. We got some more comfortable chairs. We got some accent lighting going on. We've got a monitor here now in the studio. So now, hopefully, we're going to go through StreamYard, Matt, and start getting some awesome guests on the channel.
Nice.
So
yeah, that's always been kind of like the issue is, getting people here and us traveling and between working, because we're a weekly show, not a daily show. And, again, it's just hard. Scheduling is hard.
Yep. But we're making it happen.
Absolutely.
And I'm real excited to see, how the podcast is going to really hopefully take off and do great things moving forward. And today's podcast, we're going to be talking about combatives. All right.
Nice.
Hand-to-hand combat. Now, if you guys know my background, particularly, that with the channel, we primarily discuss firearms. So we thought this would be a great reprieve to sort of talk a little bit more about hand-to-hand combat. And Matt has some exciting news to share. But before we get too far into talking about combatives, I would like to just quickly mention, go over to Ballistic Ink and pick yourself up a snazzy new t-shirt. Ballistic Ink is today's sponsor of this show. Definitely go over and check them out. Of course, Matt and Lisa do great jobs with our t-shirts, and you can support all of your favorite content creators directly by purchasing t-shirts over on Ballistic Ink. We've got some amazing designs. You're going to love them. The shirts are very well made. Great job on the printing that they do. They're just fantastic. And in the comment section down below, when you place your order, if you don't want the flag on the sleeve, you can actually opt to remove the flag or have the flag. So you have complete options in terms of how you want your shirt to be printed. And they're available in a ton of different colors, different weights. So there are quite a few options. And definitely, if you want to support the podcast and support your favorite channels, go over to Ballistic Ink and make sure that you get yourself an awesome new t-shirt to make a very loud and clear statement about what you believe. And that's very important too, to wear your politics literally on your sleeve. And that's a way that you can do so is by supporting Ballistic Ink and supporting LLP.
That's right.
Without further ado, we're going to get to talking about combatives. And so I've got some pages pulled up, and we're going to be discussing some different disciplines related to combatives. But, when you get down to the nitty-gritty,
right,
one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat is as old as time itself. Like, men have been fighting each other hand-to-hand for a very, very, very long time.
Oh, absolutely. I would say since the dawn of man, when you had people just two large armies running into each other with no weapons, and they're just duking it out. And then it evolved into this, one-on-one arena aspect when it was like the Roman times, and it became a spectacle of like one-on-one combat. Who has the better, combatant? Wars were solved with one-on-one combat. They would say, hey, this is the champion of this country, and this is the champion of this country. And, instead of sending 1 million men to die, we can settle this with 2. 2 go in, 1 comes out.
Imagine having solved. That weight on your shoulders to know that like an entire army is looking at you to be like the champion.
Oh,
I mean, can you imagine how that feels to be in that situation, and to know that, the very outcome of a battle, of an entire movement could hinge upon your skills as a warrior.
Now imagine if we solve those problems like that now. Yeah, things might go a little bit more smooth.
Yeah, things might go a little more smoothly.
But, we brought this up because I was talking with Eric, and, this is a predominantly firearms related channel. It revolves around firearms, and there's more and more stuff you see popping up, and you're seeing things that you look at it and you go, well, was that a scenario in which you should have drawn and fired a weapon? Could you have solved this with, with open hand skills? Is there an intermediary? Is there a point in time where it's right below using deadly force and right above retreating? So, here in Georgia, we don't have a duty to retreat. It's a stand your ground state. But that doesn't necessarily mean your first option is going to go to gun or anything like that. There's going to be some steps in between, and having any type of combative experience, whether it's, boxing, your more traditional arts like karate, taekwondo, wrestling being the oldest, jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu being the most popular right now due to like mixed martial arts and UFC. There's a lot of options there that you have, and I think a lot of people overestimate their open hand capabilities, and it is a really, really different scenario when you actually have to put hands on somebody.
I think that it's important to make the distinction that I believe that every man and woman and every person who considers himself a provider or in other words, just a capable person, needs to have the ability to defend themselves if they happen to be unarmed. I mean, what if you draw your pistol and your pistol gets knocked out of your hand, or you slip, or something happens, right? That you may have to resort to hand-to-hand combat. And, we see all these situations where there's knife attacks happening all the time, and there's people just using like improvised random weapons and grabbing anything they can find to hurt people. So, evil people will always find a way to hurt others, right? And it doesn't always necessarily have to be related to firearms, right? People have this stigma where they feel that, if you're going to meet your demise at the hands of some evil person, that it's going to be an AR-15 or a Glock or something like that. But, we see many cases where, like Australia, for instance, has some of the strictest gun laws in the world, right? I mean, they do have, it's very difficult to be able to defend yourself in Australia, as far as I know. And we saw a recent video come out of Australia, and this is one thing, Matt and I were talking about earlier. And, I'm sure many of you have seen the video. Now, I can't show the video on YouTube. Now, if you are listening here on all of the various podcast forms and audio form, you're just hearing us. But if you're watching us on YouTube, obviously, we film videos of our podcast. So if you're a listener and you'd like to also get the video experience, you can follow us on the YouTube channel over Iraq Veteran 8888 for all of our podcasts in video form. So I can't show the video form on YouTube. However, Matt and I are going to watch this video in question and just sort of react to it. I've already fast forwarded to the item in question here. I'm going to turn the volume up so you may hear some of the audio. But we're going to just check this out. I haven't seen this video in a few days. We're going to watch it and just to refresh ourselves and kind of talk about how scary things can go. This happened outside of Brisbane in Australia. Now, remember, Australia has very strict gun laws.
That's right.
All right, ready, Matt?
Yep, let's do it.
All right.
Ooh, that was it. That was it. Look at him. He don't know what's going on. He thinks he's all right.
Oh, man.
He thinks he's okay, and boom, hits the ground.
Poor fella. That's terrible.
Ooh, yeah,
so,
man, that was rough.
So just to put into context what we just saw in this video, now I'm not going to try to get into the background of what caused this to occur. All right, boys will be boys. Whatever happened in this shopping mall, they decided that they obviously got pissed at each other over something, and it evolved into some street fight, essentially. And one of the people pulled out a knife, and their buddies are all, going after this dude. And one of the guys here in this video, who just appears to be trying to kind of back his buddy up, who's, being kind of aggressive, right? But guy took a knife to the throat and bled out in seconds.
Literally, it was about 20 seconds. Yeah.
Just that quick.
He took 2 steps, and you could see it in his eyes, man. He didn't know. He thought he was okay. He didn't know what was going on.
Man.
He looked around. He's like, hey, man, he must have probably pumped out about 1.5 pints of blood in about maybe,
5 seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe 20 seconds. It's all over the place.
I know.
And
terrible.
He just hits the ground, and okay, you might watch some people on IG and think that you're going to be able to get yourself out of that situation, but that was strictly a situational awareness deal. I mean, he was within striking distance. He looked away, exposed his carotid artery, and bam, he hit it. Now, I will tell you, to play devil's advocate, the other dude had impeccable aim. I mean, to hit a carotid artery in that situation, in that scenario, that quick.
In one try.
And it was pretty clean. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was like bloop, and he was out.
It wasn't even a long blade.
Nope.
It don't take much. 3 inches.
I was going to say about 3 inches is what it looked like. And he was in and out. He must have been practicing on watermelons when he was younger or something. Cause I mean, that was quick.
So I want to talk about this a little bit. So this relates to what we're talking about combatives. So the thing is, we all assume that we're always going to have a firearm, that we're going to be able to protect ourselves. And we have this like picturesque expectation, if you will, that we're going to, draw our pistol from concealment and win the day. You know what I mean? And that's the way that we tend to approach it. Like we feel like, that's going to be the just scenario that we expect in our heads. We don't expect that we're going to be unarmed or that someone's going to have a weapon and we're not. Right? Or maybe you're with your children. Would you expect your children to go up against a knife attacker? No. What would you tell your children to do? You tell them to run away, to create more distance. Now, nobody likes a Monday quarterback. So I am not a hand-to-hand combatives expert. I'm not even close to being a hand-to-hand combatives expert. But I know what I see, I know what I observe, and I know what I probably would have done in this situation. For one, I would utilize my verbal judo, and I would certainly not try to put myself in that situation to begin with at all in the first place. Now, be that as it may, sometimes we find ourselves in these positions whether we want to deal with it or not, and you're faced with a situation where, guess what? You're dealing with it whether you like it or not, all right? The person's being aggressive, what have you. But in this situation, I would say that creating more distance, every foot or two of distance that you create, according to the Israeli Defense Force, every foot of distance you create from a knife attacker, you are increasing your survivability by 10%.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
That's the IDF, and I think they know a thing or two about cutlery and about fighting with knives.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I feel like it's unfortunate the young man died, and it's unfortunate that these boys could not settle their differences more civilly. But let's face it, we don't live in a civil world, and sometimes you have to go to throws.
Yep.
So why don't I have some articles pulled up, Matt, and I do want to talk about like some historical context for all of this. But before we do, I mean, tell us a little bit about what you got going on with the dojo. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. So, I've always, to give you a little background, if you guys may know, you may not, we had John Lovell on a while back on our audio only, and we were talking about training and doing martial arts, and you may have heard from there, but I did practice martial arts at a pretty high level in my younger years. 2-time South Carolina state champion, 1-time North Carolina state champion, bronze medal in the Junior Olympics for Taekwondo. Trained with the national team for the 96 Olympics, but I was too young at that time, so I trained, but you couldn't compete due to your age. It's a contact sport. Or I'm sorry, the 96 and then the 2000 Olympics is when it went to the actual medal. It went to a medal sport. In the 96 Olympics, it was a exhibition sport. And I've always liked martial arts, but I'm more fond of the grappling side of it, so like the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we're planning on opening, we're on the final stages right now of opening a Jiu-Jitsu academy here locally in Atlanta. It's going to be a great space, fairly large, multiple mats, and we're going to bring in some really good, we have some good professors, that's what they're called in Jiu-Jitsu if you don't know, to teach, really focusing on kids classes, but more importantly, we're also going to bring in some I guess you could say teachers for the disarmament and combatives option. So there's going to be plenty of jiu-jitsu, but there's also going to be more of your practical combatives where you're in gear, things that you might be wearing. Because when you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're normally either in no-gi, which is like in a Under Armour, rash guard and shorts, or a gi, which is your traditional kimono uniform.
It's like forgive me for saying this, it looks like a bathrobe.
they're affectionately known as pajamas.
Yeah.
So they're called pajama parties to the no-gi guys. Um, so those are your two traditional styles. And then you very rarely get the opportunity to execute these moves while you're wearing gear. So whether you're in your duty belt, whether you're in even something like jeans, things that you're more commonly going to be wearing when you're out and about, not skin tight spandex or
Yeah.
pajamas.
Or
So
being a naked, greased up guy.
exactly. So we're really going to bring in a lot of cool stuff, and you're going to get to come out and train with some of the guys in the industry, us, and really get some good training in. So, and that's going to be here pretty soon. We're just finalizing the details on that.
So I recall Sandhill
Yeah.
and combatives training. All
Yeah.
right. And in that combatives training, now, granted, I remember the drill sergeant saying that we're going to teach you just enough to go out and get your ass kicked.
That's right.
All right. I remember that
Yep.
fondly. And it's funny because they meant it too, and they're not lying. But they try to teach you enough to kind of help you survive in a. That's the limit of my hand-to-hand combat training is on Sandhill basic training. That's all the real maybe some bayonet training, combatives. That's about it. But what they teach, and maybe you can, kind of let me know how this relates to jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
They teach that most fights are totally going to wind up on the ground, and you should
Yes.
totally learn how to grapple really well because that's where you're going to end the fight. And so your uniform becomes, it can be a help and a hindrance, right? So they even teach you to use your enemy's uniform to choke them with and things like that.
Correct.
So jiu-jitsu is that a jiu-jitsu
Yes.
function?
Yeah. So, and that's why it translates so well for the military. The Army adopted Gracie combatives, which is what we actually learned on our train up as well. So they brought in some guys, and the gi moves, which are like cross collar chokes, being able to do like elevator sweeps, holding on to the pants, things you wouldn't be able to do with no gi, totally work in uniform because you have lapels, you have sleeves, you have legs and boots,
Belts.
so web gear. So you're able to grab on the same way that you normally would with a gi on. So it translates very well. And then you have the no-gi version, which is more like your street, what you're going to see, t-shirts, shorts, where you're not really utilizing the clothes to grab. You're grabbing onto wrists, you're grabbing onto the back, you're doing a lot of leg locks because you don't have the ability to grab onto anything. There's nothing there to grab.
So really, the more gear someone has on, the more vulnerable they might be to someone who has hand-to-hand combatives training.
That is correct, yeah. Unless both of them know it. And then it turns into like, you might be on the
snake fight.
Yeah, you're gonna be on the battlefield, and both armies are sitting there watching these guys roll, and you're like, oh man, that's cool, which would be interesting to see.
Interesting.
Yes.
So I'm super excited for it, man. So
Yeah,
you do
man.
call it a dojo, right? I keep
not-
using that
well,
word, but is that what
not
it's-
really? You would call it like academy or
Academy.
a mat or a gym. It just depends because there is a difference between a gym and an academy, and that's kind of getting into like the minutia of what it is, but. Just for all intents and purposes, academies really focus on one thing. So you might say like, oh, we only do jiu-jitsu or we only do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. We don't teach like Muay Thai. We don't teach like boxing or anything like that because you're really zeroing in on one particular style versus, and the teaching methodology is different as well. So at an academy, you might teach like how to do an arm bar, but you're teaching, the sequence of it. Versus a gym might say, well, we're going to learn how to do an arm bar. We're going to learn to do a leg lock, but you're not teaching the sequence of like how to get to it, what scenario you would use it in, and why you would use it. So it's just a little bit of a different teaching methodology.
There's always something that has, really intrigued me about mixed martial arts, MMA, because when you look at those fighters and they use such a mixed variety of different styles, it does allow them to sort of like catch their opponent off guard because you don't know if, this guy's going to come up with a sneaking crane or if he's going to do some freaking, I'm not as knowledgeable about it as you are, but
you will be soon.
From the outside, I can't wait. But from the outside looking in, it's interesting. Like you never know if it's going to be like bum rush, bum fighting, or if it's going to be like, backwoods Alabama redneck fighting, or if it's just going to be some straight up karate or jiu-jitsu or any type of discipline. So it really takes a master in the arts of hand-to-hand combat to get into mixed martial arts, where people are really, they're probably, a lot of those guys probably have a style of combat that they specialize in, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what y'all do, right? When you're learning a discipline, you want to give yourself completely to that discipline. But some of them, they do mix several different ideas.
You're right.
So they can just take what they like from every discipline and kind of form their own form of combat, hand-to-hand combat, that gives them the ability to catch their opponent off guard.
And that's exactly what, MMA is, mixed martial arts. And that fundamentally changed the game. So the original MMA creator was actually Bruce Lee. So when he made Jeet Kune Do was exactly that. It was Kung Fu. It was like it was based off Wing Chun, which is the hand speed, which is what a lot of the early MMA practitioners did. And then he took other elements from other martial arts. He said, well, this has a really good kick, so we're going to implement that style into Jeet Kune Do. And that was the original like mixed martial art. Then it turned into when it went into like UFC 1 with, Royce Gracie. That's when you really saw Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu come into play. And it is different. You have Jiu-Jitsu, which is Japanese, and then you have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where they just took it and they made their own changes. They implemented their own style to it, and that's what's known now as BJJ.
Cool.
So it is different. It's a lot. It's not as technically sound as jiu-jitsu. The Japanese really love to do everything perfectly. It's like, the art of perfection is what the Japanese are known for. Yes.
Like really to focus and practice on very distinctive techniques.
Yes.
And to master those techniques. And it's funny when you look at Japanese culture, they do everything like that, whether it's art form. There's that one art form where they take that really thin paper and they have to, if you move wrong, you can rip the paper, and like they'll paint on that real thin paper. So like every art, when you look at the art they do, that like every single movement was perfect because the paper didn't rip. And it's like, who would do that? Why would you set some limitation? But that's the art form, because it focuses on perfection. You look at the Zen gardens, the way that, everything they do, they really want to try and go for perfection, whether it's art, whether it's food, whether it's combat. So you do have to appreciate that aspect of their culture, that they are very much perfectionists. Heck, look at the vehicles they make.
Yeah.
Like the way they engineer things, it's just kind of different. Like they go more for like, hey, how quiet can we make it? How efficient can we make it? How can we reduce cabin noise? How can we reduce, the bumpiness of the ride? They factor in like making a comfortable driving experience.
Right.
And they may not necessarily care so much about engineering something that is super complicated like the Germans would do, whereby the Germans are going to sit back and go, wow, this particular piece of hardware, wow, look at this engineering. Whereby the Japanese may go, well, but it's noisy, but it rattles, but it bumps, it's hard to service. You know what I mean? It's just a different mindset, and it's just cool to see the different mindsets when it comes to combatives too.
It is, and the part of that is that like you said, the Japanese take it to another level where it's not just about the actual combatives portion; it's about the ritual that takes place before and after. And a good example of that is in the Japanese archery. They have those really nice long bows and they shoot arrows and they're pretty far, but that's not really like when you go and do that, it's actually more about the ritual before and after. The shooting part might take about 30 seconds, but it's about, the bow before you get on the mats, and you have to take 14 steps to get to the place that you're going to shoot from, and the ritual you do before you shoot, you put the bow. It's like this very, very elaborate, long ritual to shoot for 20 to 25 seconds, and then you get up and you bow and you walk backwards, and so basically what they did was they X'd all that. They were like, hey, if you're going to put, just as an example of what's the difference between jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, that basically said, all right, we need to get rid of all this other stuff that doesn't really pertain to
the actual
combat portion of it, and we're going to take this combat portion of it and we're going to make it better. And that's exactly what they did. So that's what I have going on, and
awesome.
what we have going on, I should say. And I'm excited, man. It's going to be awesome. And that's really what kind of catapulted this whole conversation about, having open hand skills, because, you're seeing more and more of these situations where people just don't know. Like these videos are popping up. I think, there's a lot of like people online showing these crazy like disarms and thing, and you're just looking at that and you're like, you're gonna get somebody killed. Why don't you show them how to do it correctly, or
There you go.
or do something that's more feasible?
Yep. Well, so we mentioned earlier that, like, let's just say wrestling in general is a really old fighting discipline. I've got a Wikipedia article pulled up now. I know it's Wikipedia, but let's just, to provide some context.
Sure.
And to just sort of get into a little bit of history, we're going to talk a little bit about, we have the history of wrestling, boxing, and also have some jiu-jitsu basics. Let's go through some of these and elaborate and talk about it a little bit and learn something, right?
Yeah,
Learning's
absolutely.
fun. Okay. Wrestling represents one of the oldest forms of combat. The origins of wrestling go back 15,000 years through cave drawings. Babylonian and Egyptian reliefs show wrestlers using most of the holds known in the present-day sport. Literary references to it occur as early as the Old Testament and the ancient Indian Vedas. In the book of Genesis, the patriarch Jacob is said to have wrestled with God or an angel.
Ooh.
The Iliad, in which Homer recounts the Trojan War of the 13th or 12th century BC, also contains mentions of wrestling. Indian epics of names I'm not going to try to pronounce contain references to martial arts, including wrestling. All right, and this goes probably more to your point that you were mentioning, Matt. In ancient Greece, wrestling occupied a predominant place in legend, literature, and philosophy. I mean, I think it gives us a basic idea that, people have been scrapping a long time.
and it's interesting that wrestling is probably the best or one of the best secondhand skills you can have for jiu-jitsu. Because, I mean, we see it all the time when wrestlers come in, whether even high school wrestlers that wrestled for only 4 years, heaven forbid you get like a D1 wrestler come in there and he just starts throwing black belts around like crazy. Now, they are different once they get him on the ground. They don't really know the end game, but going from vertical to horizontal, they're masters. And that can serve to be a good art to have just in general. Like if you're getting into a street fight, being able to go from vertical to a single leg or a double leg, or being able to control the arms, I mean, that in and of itself is invaluable. I mean, imagine you having a guy square up on you and, you're going to do an arm drag because you're within this distance, and you just do an arm drag right into a choke and done. Problem solved. 30 seconds. Most people don't know how to combat that because, again, they overestimate their ability to fight. They think it's going to turn into some movie like, oh, we're going to square off and we're going to go 3 or 4 rounds, and no.
So with a blood choke, you're essentially, limiting blood and oxygen to the brain.
Yep.
And if held long enough, can make you pass out and or die.
Yeah.
I mean, you can
by
kill
long
someone
enough,
with a blood choke.
By long enough, 10 to 15 secons.
Really?
Yeah.
So someone could die.
No, not die, but you'll put them out.
How long would it take to be lethal?
I mean, you'd have to go for
minute?
about 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes.
So basically, when you see people grappling and wrestling and they get into a choke and they tap out, like what we say tap out,
yep,
that just means, hey, okay, you win. Like,
well, that's
because
they know what happened. Like that's like the ultimate form of respect, though, because it's like you're saying, hey, you got me. There's no way I'm getting out of this.
Right.
Like as a practitioner,
basically,
I
it's,
know.
hey, let go, you win.
Yes, it's like I know what you got. You know what you got. We're done. Let's reset, or or you win if it's a tournament. But yeah, I mean the amount of time it takes from tapping to lights out, probably about 10 seconds.
So within the context of, let's just say, everyday life, let's just not really think about this in terms of a discipline of combat such as jiu-jitsu or boxing or wrestling or whatever. And let's just say the average person on the street who's just going about their everyday life and they find themselves in a scary situation. Maybe someone's got a knife, or, you
got a knife, you better run.
Look,
like the only defense to a knife is to run. I don't, I mean, if you don't have your firearm and you don't have, even if you do have a knife, run. Because,
I would never in a million years try to mess with somebody who's got a knife. I'm going to create more distance. Now, look, if I've got my gun, sure, I may draw my gun, but it doesn't mean I'm still not going to try to open the gap.
That's right.
The closer they get, the worst situation you're in. And when we look at the standards of, for instance, when people say 7 feet, 10 feet, or 7 yards, or something like, they use these distances. There's plenty of videos on YouTube that you can pull up that demonstrate this principle in action quite well, and I'm not going to attempt to even demonstrate it, but in full speed or anything like that. However, there are plenty of instructors that can show this, is that someone with a knife can cover a ton of ground in
21
very
feet.
little time.
It was 21 feet.
In a second,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yep.
like a second and a half,
Dude,
you know? Yeah.
I've seen plenty, and there's plenty, like you said, there's plenty of instructors out there that illustrated this. And I know one in particular, every single time they ran that drill, he got him with a knife. Now, it might not have been like a severe stab, but from the point that he drew,
Yeah.
and the thing is, he knew he was coming. So he was in the surrender position, 21 feet away. He came running at him with a knife. He drew from concealment. He shot him with the simunition, but that knife blade also had like simulated paint on, like blood.
Yeah.
And he every single time
You're getting cut.
he got cut
You're
every
getting
single
cut.
time. So I'm like, it's just not worth it, man.
No way. No way. So again, when I say the average person on the street going about their everyday business, look at all the videos that are like, if you go on Twitter and follow Warpath, I'm going to put his at down in the description box below, but he's one of the guys on Twitter that I follow. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's Iraq Veteran 8888. But I share some of his stuff. So he shares a lot of random combatives and just videos of people, you know, getting in bad situations like that. That's how I found the unfortunate video from Brisbane of the gentleman unfortunately getting stabbed in the neck, which is terrible. That's terrible,
That
right?
turned my stomach, man.
But
Oof.
he shares a lot of random stuff like that, and sometimes they're wins. Sometimes it's a successful use of self-defense, and sometimes they're losses. But most importantly, you learn from it. You go, holy crap, if that ever happens, if I'm in a situation where something like that might happen, you know what, I might do X, Y, Z. So it is important that we learn from these things. I mean, I know that there's some sensationalism that occurs when people see all these violent things on the internet. But the smart people in the room are the ones that are standing back and going, all right, what can I learn from this? This is unfortunate. This is terrible. This is a loss of life. This is a very terrible lapse of judgment. But how can I come away from this to avoid this from happening to me or my family, or to make sure that maybe I turn the tides and make something like this, you know, prevent something like this from happening? All right, in your everyday environment, people are, you know, going around doing their thing or whatever. You've seen plenty of videos where these guys, these freaking thugs or whoever, just run by and just knock the crap out of somebody walking down the street.
Knockout game.
I've seen, well, whether it's knockout game or whether it's, you know, I've seen videos of just these ladies walking down the road on the street in like Chicago or in St. Louis or somewhere, one of those cities, minding their own business, and some person just gets a running start, runs by them, beats the crap out of them, and runs away. Like, what's the point? But how in the world, other than just having a good form of situational awareness and trying to avoid it or trying to, you know, combat it somehow, but, you know, there's situations like that where, you know, how in the world do you know it's even coming? Like, sometimes it just comes out of nowhere, and if you're not ready, I mean, you're going to get hit. You're going to get stabbed.
And that's a very valid point, and I don't think there's any amount of training, whether it's martial arts or firearms training or anything, that's going to teach you that. That has to be a learned from just, you know, being in those situations and having that situational awareness, because that's what it comes down to. You could have no training in firearms, no training in martial arts or grappling, and have full situational awareness, and you're going to live 100 times longer than the guy that is trained to the gills and has zero situational awareness, because they're just going to walk right into it.
I was talking to Brandy about this the other day, and I think this is a perfect time to kind of mention my mindset about this. And here's the thing. If you're not going to be the biggest fish in the tank, if you're not going to be the strongest, you know, animal in the woods, right, you got to be the smartest animal in the woods, right? So the way I look at it is like, okay, I may not have exactly the best hand-to-hand combat skills out there. Yeah, there's probably 100 people that could take me no problem. But here's the thing. It's like, you also can be in control of the situations you put yourself in to some degree. And it's important to know what situations you can control and what you can't control, right? So I can control where I go, when I go, who I'm with, what resources I have with me, right? and how, and so you can arm yourself with some basic knowledge to avoid situations like that, right? I mean, for instance, I'll give you a great example. Brandon and I were in Savannah recently, and we were down there for our anniversary. We've been married 11 years now. Been together 15, been married 11.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're down in Savannah. Well, in Savannah, there's this sort of like big parking garage complex that's under like the street down there and everything, and it's a multi-level thing, and there's all these random stairwells that go. It's a snaking maze of little shifty go-betweens. The perfect place for someone to break a liquor bottle over your head or to run into some meth head, which we did run into a meth head. I turned the corner and dude smoking meth, and I about kicked him in the face because he caught me off guard. I mean, look, sorry, not that I want to kick someone in the face, but he caught me off guard, and of course that smell.
Yeah.
And I turned to him, I'm like, dude, do that shit somewhere else. Like, what are you doing? You're in a public parking garage. Like, go somewhere else. Go to the park or do something. Or go to your house. Like, why are you going to do that out in public? That's not the point. The point is there's shifty little go-betweens. And it's like sometimes you can't help that, you might have to go in some little random dark, parking garage to get from point A to point B. Now, once you're up to the street level, I mean, no one's going to start any crap with you there, but it doesn't mean they won't be waiting for you at the bottom of the stairs to ambush you and rob you, or they won't be waiting for you when you're getting in your car. And that's a good example of how you've got to keep your head on a swivel. What if that guy would have smoked his mind out on meth and got mad that his high was going away because they get angry?
Mm-hmm.
When that high starts wearing off, that's when they commit crimes because they get anxious and they don't have any money, and they'll do anything for that fix. It's just they're coming down off of it. And how do I know that he wasn't waiting there with a knife or anything? And he was perfectly within range to stab me. He could have easily stabbed either one of us.
Yep.
And not to say that he was violent, but at the same time, I'm kind of thinking, man, you have to keep your head on a swivel.
You do.
You don't have to be the strongest. You don't have to be the most well-prepared. Now, is it important to understand combatives and to learn? Absolutely. I'm looking forward to coming up there and getting some training and learning some stuff, because I need to refresh on my hand-to-hand combative skills. But in the short term, if you're lacking in that category, you can still, really use your inhibitions and your mindset, and to have the proper mindset to not be a victim, to not have the victim mindset. You don't have to be the best at combatives if you are good at making sure that you're not going to put yourself in those situations.
That's what it comes down to, is just having that right mindset and the situational awareness to say, hey, this is a pretty shady place. I should probably raise my antenna up and just be a little bit more on guard. But, like you said, it does help to have those open hand skills. It helps even more to have your firearm on you. So I'm not saying this is a replacement. Obviously it's not. But like you said, there are times when, you either lose your weapon, it gets taken from you, heaven forbid that happens. You need the ability to defend yourself in those situations.
You still don't bring a knife to a gunfight.
Absolutely
now
not.
Look, just to be clear, I know we're talking about hand-to-hand combatives, but if I got my CZ75 and I see you and I got enough time, you're toast. I don't care how good of a knife fighter you are. As long as I got enough of fair notice, it's over.
Yep.
Okay. Now, to be fair, I'm still a gunman. All right. Now, I don't mind learning how to scrap a little bit, but I'm always going to be a gun dude first and foremost. That's right. Carry a gun. Have the proper mindset. It's just so interesting. Like the history of combatives, like how long people have been honing the skills of defeating another person in hand-to-hand combat. It's intriguing because it's shaped the very world that we live in. Like the world we live in is because the world is what it is because of people's ability to fight wars against each other, and that shaped the planet. Like the planet we live on is because of warriors.
It is, and what you're seeing now currently is you have all these awesome martial arts, and I use that term loosely because that's what they've always been known as, but now it's really turned more into like almost a sport. Like, so every single of these arts has a sport variation, And that can be liked or disliked. So wrestling is a very old sport.
It is.
You consider that a sport, not a martial art, right? But that's not how it started. It started as, a way to kill somebody. Like, how do two guys go in, they wrestle, and one of them dies. Broken neck, broken arm, broken legs.
Or
like,
otherwise incapacitated.
Yeah, incapacitated.
Or give up.
Yep.
Or whatever.
Boxing didn't originally start, as a sport. It was like two guys duking it out. And they said, well, what do we call this when two men face each other and throw fists? Why, we'll call it boxing. And then it turns into a sport. Judo is one of the oldest martial arts from Japan as well. Learning how to throw people using their own momentum and break arms and stuff like that. That's in the Olympics as a sport. And it's a great contestation. People are saying it's being watered down because anytime you translate something from something that's supposed to kill somebody to something that you need to score points on, it does get diluted. You're taking a lot away from it because
a competitor's not walking away with a broken wrist.
Yeah, they're not trying. You're learning to. You're wanting to win medals and win tournaments, not kill somebody. Which it can be done. It happens all the time. Like winning medals, not.
So most of those dudes, if they did full speed jiu-jitsu or a judo against you, they could totally ruin your day.
Absolutely. The running joke with judo is that you're not throwing somebody into the earth when you throw them. You're taking the earth and hitting them with it. Because if you've ever been thrown by a black belt judoka, like someone that practices judo, it's like it will shatter your vertebrae. Like, it is so bad. Like and it hurts so bad if you're not used to it or you're not ready for it. Like the amount of
Wow.
like the amount of pain that happens is ridiculous. So they're if they practice a lot, they're very careful. But I mean, it's a great discipline to learn. Taekwondo, my old art, it was amazing. It used to be amazing. Very fast kicks, very powerful kicks. As soon as it got converted into a sport, it started getting dwindled down to what you see now. I'm not a huge fan of it. Which is one of the reasons I stopped practicing. It turned into more of like this ballet dance.
Going through the motions.
Yeah, it kind of lost its luster there. And the same thing with judo. A lot of people are starting to not do judo because of the sport aspect of it.
So do you think that that's why things like MMA and UFC have been so popular? Because people really want to see like raw combat.
They do. They want raw. Like they want
raw, real combat, real wounds, real pain, real hurt, like full speed.
And
like
now
two warriors getting in a pen and duking it out, and the best man wins. Like there's something primordial about that in our psyche.
So much.
We have a need. We have a need to have combatives. Like it's part of our mental breakdown as people.
So much so now that people are saying, oh, well, UFC isn't raw enough. We want bare knuckle boxing. So now you have, actual promotions going on where they have the gloves, but then they have the knuckle portions of it like removed. So you have people just boxing bare knuckle. And
let's just bring back gladiators.
Essentially, that's what we're going with it.
Let's just bring back the gladiator ring, the Coliseum.
Well, here's the thing. People don't understand that the gloves that you use, like the UFC gloves, they're small, lightweight gloves. They're preventing you from getting cut, which in essence gives you a longer fight. It's not there to protect your face. It's there to protect their hands so they can keep going. Wow. With bare knuckle boxing, like these men and women, they're getting cut up. They're getting like, oh, it's nasty. I mean, is it fun to watch? Yes. Is it? Do you feel bad for them? I feel about
as a fighter, could you sustain being on a circuit and getting into fights like every week at that rate? You'd have to heal, wouldn't you?
No, I mean they fight I would imagine they're fighting maybe once every 4 or 5 months, depending. Like
they heal. They go to the doctor. They make sure their bones are good. I mean, that's hard on your body, isn't it?
It is, but when you start getting into these. When you look at these sports, it used to be that you're getting into these sports, at a very late age to become great at them. So you had 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds starting to get good. Now that barrier is so great that these kids have to start when they're like 4 or 5
to develop
the skills to be champions. So, when you're out on the street, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna try to fight this dude. You don't know that guy could have been doing, boxing since he was 5, and you're gonna go lights out in like 30 seconds. Because you look now on IG, you see these prodigies, these kids, these like 6 and 7-year-olds just going at it. It amazes me.
It's impressive.
Oh man,
it's impressive.
It is absolutely bonkers.
Kind of going back to the knife stabbing in Brisbane. I hate to keep bringing that up, but I just want to mention as well. You don't know what kind of training that dude had with a knife.
Dude, it was clean.
Look,
you heard me mention it. I was like, that was clean.
And I don't know the full backstory of what happened. Maybe that guy was in the right. Maybe he was the one being attacked. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. But the point is, you don't know what someone's training disposition is. It's like poking a snake and thinking, this snake ain't aggressive. But you don't know. Maybe you might have messed with the snake that's the one that's going to come after you and get you right in the jugular. So that's what's so scary about it. Let's go back to the wrestling Wikipedia. I was reading this. I thought it was cool, and it kind of correlates to America. So we talked about, wrestling's been around 15,000 years. During the Middle Ages, 5th century to 15th century, wrestling remained popular and enjoyed the patronage of many royal families, including those of France, Japan, and England. Early British settlers in America brought a strong wrestling tradition with them. The settlers also found wrestling to be popular among Native Americans. Amateur wrestling flourished throughout the early years of the North American colonies and served as a popular activity at country fairs, holiday celebrations, and in military exercises. The first organized national wrestling tournament took place in New York City in 1888. Wrestling has also been an event at every modern Olympic Games since the 1904 Olympic Games in St. Louis, Missouri. The international governing body for the sport, the United World Wrestling, was established in 1912 in Belgium. Abraham Lincoln enjoyed to box. He liked to box and fight. And they would set up on the White House lawn and get in little scuffles and stuff.
Boy,
imagine picking a fight with the president.
Oh, boy.
But he loved to fight. All right, anyway, just a little history lesson.
Well, obviously this was prior to the Secret Service.
I think the rules were a little different.
Yeah, they were a little lax back then.
All right, so now we'll talk a little bit about boxing. Now, I'm here on legendsboxing.com. I've just got a page pulled up. I was looking for, some information here. So we're just going to kind of report what we have here about the history of boxing. So it says, where did boxing come from? Go ahead, Matt.
Boxing is one of the oldest known sports today, with 2,000-year-old depictions on the wall of tombs in Egypt and stone carvings indicating that Sumerians, who lived in what is now Iraq, someplace we are very familiar with,
yes,
boxed at least 5,000 years ago. Boxing got its start as an exhausting and brutal spectacle in ancient Greece. Two men would sit face to face with their fists tightly wrapped in strips of tough leather. That sounds fun. They would then hit each other until one of them fell on the ground unconscious. Sounds about right. Or even worse, dead.
Damn. Dead.
Yes. D-E-D. Dead.
Dead right there.
Roman fighters or gladiators, on the other hand, fought with the primary intent to kill their opponent, wearing leather straps around their fists, plated with metal. Oh,
that's hardcore.
The old stinger. Okay. However, boxing was soon abolished around 393 AD because it was deemed too savage.
Oh, come on.
That says something when the Romans banned something for being too savage. Those guys were pretty savage in and of themselves.
Listen, the Romans had a freaking bull
that
they would put you in and boil you alive inside the bull, and you'd be screaming, and it would be coming out of these ports in the bull, and it had horns, the horns on the bull that would amplify your screaming, torturing voice as you were burned alive inside of this bull.
And apparently...
And they said that it was too savage.
Oh, boy.
It must have been really savage.
So Jack Broughton, the reigning champion from 1973 to 1975, was the first person to introduce a boxing school. He also helped to formulate the first set of boxing rules and was the inventor of mufflers, the precursor of the modern boxing glove. That's not exactly what I thought was going to come from that. Broughton invited high society gentlemen to make the change from sponsoring fighters to becoming fighters themselves. As boxing moved across the sea in the early 19th century into America, it wasn't very popular. That is, until Theodore Roosevelt became an advocate. When Roosevelt was a police commissioner, he would urge his officers to train in the art of ars pugandi. He believed boxing was a great way to vent out man's animal spirit. Sounds like something he would
Wow,
say.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Along with bloodletting and all that, all ancient stuff.
That's true. You could go to the barber back then and have them cut you in bloodletting.
Oh, that's right.
That's why the barber pole has red and white. Because the blood from the bloodletting.
They were also dentists. They would do dental operations on you as well. Interesting, yes. And this didn't change when he became president either. Roosevelt used to box almost daily as a way to keep active and in shape.
Awesome.
From there, boxing continued to grow in popularity with guidelines and rules put in place to protect fighters, making it the sport we all know and love today.
Outstanding.
Yes.
I didn't know that. I love learning stuff. This is fun.
And people always complain about all these different martial arts, and myself included. They're like, oh, karate is turned into a sport. Taekwondo is turned into a sport. Jiu-jitsu is turned into a sport. But nobody ever complains about wrestling and boxing, which are also sports. Yeah. I mean, you're going to tell me that, I run into a Golden Gloves boxer on the street that he's not going to put my lights out? He sure enough will.
He still has the skills. And that's an important thing. All right, translate that to shooting. Mm-hmm. Perfect example. Just because I own a lot of guns and just because I shoot a lot of guns and just because I can grab probably any firearm on this planet and generally operate it with a fair to high level amount of proficiency, right? Does that mean that I'm just going to grab my firearm and go out in society and use those skills and knowledge to hurt anyone for any reason? No, of course not. I go out to the range, I practice, I have fun, we hone our skills. There are shooting sports, there are disciplines like 3-gun and IDPA and all of these different things that we consider sports. But does that mean that 3-gun competitors are just going to, all of a sudden start shooting each other and making it real? No, but those skills are still there. If I guarantee you a 3-gun competitor who is very well versed in their abilities to operate and manipulate firearms on the move and to be competitive and sporting and their discipline, they could translate that directly to combat skills, right? I mean, you look at the Army marksmanship unit, they test out gear and they have shooters that compete in 3-gun because in 3-gun, that's when you're going to see equipment fail, you're going to see harsh conditions, you're going to see odd positions that firearms have to operate in. So all of these things help you vet your skills, help you vet your equipment, and make you harder to kill. So while it is a sport, just like in hand-to-hand combat, yes, you can take that jiu-jitsu, that judo, and yes, it's a sport, it's a discipline. You're still learning the skills necessary that if it does have to be real, as Theodore Roosevelt so aptly put, when that animal skill turns on and you have to become an animal and you turn it on like a switch, you're going to have the skills to make you deadly and efficient if you do have to do it for life or death.
Absolutely. And I mean, the one thing that I would say about any type of hand-to-hand combat, combatives, martial arts is, go out and give it a try, regardless of what it is, whether it's karate, taekwondo, whatever it is. The only piece of advice I would give you is make sure that it is something that can be pressure tested. Make sure it's something that you can actually test on other human beings at full speed. Meaning, if you're doing taekwondo, you can put pads on and you can go at it 100%. No one's going to get hurt if you're doing it correctly. Jiu-jitsu, that's what it's known for, getting on the mats. The mats don't lie. You're going to get out there, you're going to roll, you're going to either tap them, you're going to submit them, you're going to get points, whatever it may be. You can test all of those moves, and there's a way to pressure test it. It's going to have you uncomfortable, 200 pounds laying on top of you. What are you going to do? You have to learn to react to that. I would say stay away from any type of discipline or training that is too dangerous to do in real life. They don't offer any sparring. They don't offer any way to actually practice it outside of having like someone stand completely still and take 12 steps to do it. And the biggest piece of advice is if they have to do something in order for the move to work, it's bullcrap. These moves work because you make it work. You put them in the position to make it work.
You have to be in control.
Exactly. Like if I want to do a move, I'm going to put you in the position to execute that move. I don't have to wait for you to make a certain movement. I'm going to make you do that movement.
And I guess you're still going to have the ability to realize when a weakness has been revealed in your opponent and know how to exploit that weakness.
It's the
too.
game, man. It's
But
the game.
knowing that and knowing when to respond to that, that's still an important skill. But you're saying that you should have the ability to enact your skill set against someone no matter what they're doing.
Absolutely.
It's not dependent on you need to be able to initiate.
Well, and I'm going to use, I mean, again, I know multiple martial arts, but jiu-jitsu in particular, that's what it's famous for, is knowing you're always thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. So if we're rolling around on the ground, Eric, and I'm like, all right, I want your left arm. It's either I don't have to wait for you to give it to me. I can, or I can do a move that I know is going to make you give me your left arm, or I can put that left arm wherever I want. So you have different options. I don't have to wait for you to do it at the specific time. It's like, it's either I'm going to make you do it, you're going to do it, or I'm going to do a move that's going to make your arm flail and I'm going to grab it.
I'm looking forward to learning.
So that's
this sounds like so much fun. Like I want to learn some jiu-jitsu,
dude.
When you get when you get the academy going, I want to come up and check it out. And look, maybe we can make some videos about all of this. You know, some of your instructors, if they're willing, you know. You don't want to give away the farm, of course, because you're running a class.
Dude,
you know?
I mean, no, that's what it's about.
Maybe some basics just to kind of get people's juices flowing and get them interested in it and kind of raise some awareness and make them realize, wow, like this is an important skill. You could probably need to add it to your arsenal, right? So like if you're a gun person, maybe you're into medical and you're really well prepared medically, you know what? It can't hurt to have a trifecta that involves having the ability to protect yourself when you're unarmed. I mean, that's important. I mean, think about, there's probably a lot of situations you wind up unarmed.
Yep.
So you have to prepare for that eventuality. I think that's smart.
Well, that's the thing is the secret sauce is out. Everybody knows. You can look up anything you want on YouTube on jiu-jitsu. Guys, any move you want, and a lot of people do, it's not about learning the move on YouTube. It's about getting on the mats and practicing it with a live person that's giving you resistance. That's
some sparring partners.
And that's why it's so important to be able to, pressure test your moves.
Yeah, maybe some sparring partners that are like a similar skill level to you, so y'all can kind of grow together. And then maybe you get with a few people that are advanced and they can kind of get, work through what you're doing wrong and help you out, and everybody
That's
grows.
what it's about, man.
I mean, that's what the instructors do, right? They're going to whoop you a few times and let you know what, oh, wow, I thought I knew something. I really don't.
It depends on the attitude. If you come in there and you have a big head, that what you just said is going to happen. But if you come in there with an empty vessel attitude, you're gonna take away a lot.
I am totally an empty vessel kind of person. I promise I'm not going to come in there and try to act like I know everything. I'm going to come in there and act like I know nothing because I know very little. All I know is what I was taught at Sand Hill, and that's probably not nearly enough.
You'd be surprised. You would be surprised. But yeah, dude. I mean, guys, get out there and, work on your open hand skills. And even if it's just for fitness, it will translate to your everyday life.
Awesome. Man, what a great podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I really enjoyed this conversation, Matt. And, dude, it's been too long since we filmed, so I'm
It's
really
been a
looking
minute.
forward to getting some more podcasts knocked out. And, maybe we can have some guests, that do more combatives as well. So we're going to look at trying to get some really interesting guests here on the channel. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a bit of work to get it done, but I'm looking forward to the challenge. And, I really appreciate everybody listening to our podcast. Make sure you go over there and leave us great ratings on all of the different podcast forms these things show up on. Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere podcasts are found. You can find Life for Liberty and The Pursuit. And also, if you're watching here on the channel, leave us a comment. Like this video, please subscribe, click that notification bell. Make sure you're getting all of our videos. Go over to Ballistic Inc. Yet again, make sure you go over and get yourself a new t-shirt. That's one way you can support our podcast, is by supporting Ballistic Inc. and, keeping us, keeping the lights on. And actually, my light panel back here went off. I guess I didn't charge my battery bank up enough. I apologize for that. But we are trying to experiment with some new lighting. So it looks like the experiment failed, but we're gonna make sure we get the lighting up for the next one. But thank you so much for the support, and I really appreciate you guys sticking around. And we try to post every week. You'll find our podcasts over on audio form on Fridays, and then the video form usually drops on Saturday. We try to post every Saturday. Sometimes we have a lapse just because life is what it is. We're busy, but we do try to post every Saturday. So make sure you're tuning in for life, liberty, and the pursuit. And thank you all so very much for watching and or listening. What else you got for him, Matt?
That is it, guys. A great conversation. Go out and get some training, and have a nice day.
Awesome. See y'all. Have a good one. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening to Life, Liberty, and Pursuit. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. You can support us over on Ballistic Inc. by picking yourself up some merch. And remember, guys, danger is freedom. Have a good one.